When you first start out editing videos, you don't really have any systems down. You're sort of just starting from scratch every single time, and sometimes it can almost feel like you're learning a whole new piece of software every time you go to edit another video. Now that we're all going to be making a lot of educational, instructional, or lesson videos, let's take a look at a few tips to keep it not only efficient, but infinitely less frustrating. This is E-ducation. Let's get started. Plan ahead. I know this isn't technically editing, but it's going to save us a lot of time later on, so it's worth mentioning. If you're going to be putting visuals into your video, make them before you film it. I've been guilty of this where I'll look into the camera and say, yes, as we look at this diagram, even though I haven't made the diagram. What ends up happening is I watch it as I'm editing it, I'm like, I just told myself to do more work than I might have needed to. It was really nice while I was teaching to just reference all these documents and diagrams, but then I actually have to go make them. If you compile and condense your images before you start, you're less likely to just generate new things you have to make while you're talking and filming it. I've experimented with recording my iPad screen and microphone and just roughly teaching the lesson. This not only gave me images in this cool drawing style, but it helped me make sure that I included everything that I wanted to. Then I could write my script or voiceover, deliver it, and just use the iPad images as the visuals. The cool thing with that too is that you can speed them up so that it looks like you draw really fast. On the note of using the iPad as a whiteboard, record audio on anything that needs to be synced up. This is sort of on the prep side of things, but it can help if you also need to make visuals after the fact. That way you don't have to use visual clues to sync things up or guess, which is always terrifying. If I'm screen recording on the iPad, I set it so that it also picks up the sound of the microphone. This is also true if you're drawing something afterwards. What I'll do sometimes if I'm drawing a visual that I want to be synced up with the rest of the video, I'll play the video through the speakers and draw on the iPad right next to it so I get the sound from the computer into the iPad. Then it's as easy as matching up those waveforms and boom, it took 2 seconds and all of my videos lined up. Along with this, when you are syncing audio, don't worry about it being absolutely perfect. If you're filming a video at 30 frames per second, each frame is going to be about 33 milliseconds long. You only really need to zoom in far enough that you can see individual frames, especially if I was recording my sound separately from the camera and I wanted to clap to get a sync point. Just get the claps within one frame, and then when you mute the camera audio, it's going to be in sync because the visual within that one frame isn't changing. Match frame rates. Even on iPhones, you can change the frame rate or frames per second. With everything that you need for that project, either record in the same frame rate or multiples of that frame rate. Most devices in the US default to either 30 or 60 frames per second, which work together. However, if you were just shooting some sort of cinematic thing in 24 frames per second, you might want to switch back to 30 if you're going to be combining it with screen recordings, computer recordings, things like that. All right, you've shot your footage, now we're editing it. Round to the nearest pixel or percent. Especially if you're using software where you can click and drag things around the screen, I would always recommend going into the actual position value and rounding it to the nearest 10 pixels or even 1 pixel. A, it makes it easier if you have to type that number into other objects. B, it also makes the math easier. So if you need to cut that number in half, if you need to cut that number in fifths, round to the number that's gonna make that stuff the easiest. Now, even though my videos are 1080p, I edit in a 4K environment, so if I need to round something to the nearest 5 pixels, it's not going to actually move on the screen that much. Keyboard shortcuts. For those of you who are new to using computers constantly and having to use creative software, keyboard shortcuts are just commands that are already assigned to keys so that you don't have to go through the menus to try to find the function that you want to do. Here are the ones that, for video editing, I recommend getting right off the bat, even if it's your first day editing a video. Split. In Final Cut, which I use, this is Command B. The split command lets you cut your clip right where your cursor or your playhead is. This is great because if you only need 2 seconds of it and your clip is 20 minutes long, you just find that 2 seconds, split it beforehand, split it afterwards. Cut, copy, and paste. So you can just go to the menu bar and choose cut, copy, or paste. However, all of the keyboard shortcuts are usually right next to each other. Any piece of software developed in the last 20 years that cares about the people who use it uses the same key commands for cut, copy, and paste. I'm going to be talking in terms of Windows, but if you're on Mac, when I say Control, substitute that with Command. Cut, Control X. Copy, Control C. Paste, Control V. Now, when to use copy, when to use cut. If you need to make a duplicate, use copy. Any other time that you're editing videos, for the most part, just cut it and paste it Just do it in one motion so that you don't accidentally copy something else to the clipboard and delete it. If you don't use cut and you use copy, all you're doing is giving yourself another thing to do to go back and delete it. Again, Control X is cut, Control C is copy, and Control V is paste. On Mac, Command X, Command C, Command V. Nudge left or right 1 frame. So this one is really 2 key commands. Again, I use Final Cut, that is comma and period. What this lets you do is, especially if you're syncing up audio manually, it lets you move your clip 1 frame to the left or 1 frame to the right. Again, it's great for syncing audio manually because if you keep nudging it one direction and you hear it getting more off, you can just nudge it the other direction until it sounds like it's lined up. Delete or ripple delete. So again, this last one is kind of 2. On both Mac and PC, delete is typically delete. However, there's a thing in a lot of video editing software called ripple delete. iMovie does this automatically and Final Cut does this by default as well. But if you're using something like Adobe Premiere or DaVinci Resolve, it's really helpful to find the ripple delete keyboard shortcut. Now again, iMovie and Final Cut do this automatically. But in a lot of software, pressing delete just deletes the clip and leaves a gap where it was. Ripple delete deletes the clip and then moves everything after it backwards to fill that gap. This is great for things like I'm doing right now, where I'm just doing one long take and saying lines over and over again until they sound right. All I do is split at the end of one line and then split at the beginning of the next good line and ripple delete everything in the middle. Then the rest of the clip slides backwards and fills up the time that all of my butchered lines fill up. On that same note, make sure that snap is enabled if you have it. Snap is a thing that makes it so when you're sliding clips around, they lock into places that make sense. So if you have a clip and you're sliding another clip back to meet it, it will snap up against that clip instead of potentially leaving a frame or 2 of empty space in the middle. This is another one where things like iMovie generally have this on automatically. In Final Cut, it's on automatically, except you can turn it off, so just be careful. Premiere and Resolve also have it on by default, but sometimes it might get shut off, so you want to make sure you know how to activate it and deactivate it. With 99% of the editing I do, and probably 99% of the editing you do if you're watching this, you're gonna want that comfort of knowing that there's not going to be random spaces between the clips you're putting in. It can get frustrating if you are trying to trim 1 frame off of something, but again, if you shut it off, just make sure you turn it back on. Write your text in a document to spell check. Now, Final Cut has spell check built in, which I have just reaped the benefits of. But if you're using software that doesn't spell check for you, I would write out all of your titles, all of your captions, any words that are going to be on the screen. I would write them out in a Google Doc or Microsoft Word, and then just copy and paste them into the software. That way you don't have a situation where at the end it says, written by Mr. Daigle, because you left out the extra T in written. This last one is more about the theory of making videos and not so much a technical thing to make it easier. Direct attention with motion. If you're giving a list of things, don't just have one slideshow pop up. Have them each stagger in separately. That way, if your student zones out for a second, they'll see something new pop up on the screen and their eyes will lock onto that. A good trick for having lists appear that I use is make one, affect it the way you want. I like to have my titles fade in lots of times, then copy and paste that same title if you can, and then go in and edit the actual words. That way you aren't creating the motion from scratch every time. You're duplicating the part that took the longest and then just changing the thing that takes 2 seconds. There we go, 8 tips to help make your video editing more efficient, less frustrating. As always, I would love to hear your methods that you use to keep things streamlined, so definitely comment them down below. If you like what you're seeing, please hit that thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you like these E-ducation videos, definitely remember to go check out my website, daiglespage.com, where I will be posting these E-ducation videos, as well as a blog with just random tech things that I run into. Thank you for stopping by, and I will see you next time.